Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you live in Seattle right now, you already know we're in the middle of an absolute boom when it comes to accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. And honestly, it makes total sense. Whether you're looking to generate some solid rental income, house an aging parent, or just massively boost your property value, building a backyard cottage feels like the ultimate real estate move. But here's the thing. Between the glossy lifestyle magazines and those flashy contractor billboards, the actual reality of getting one of these structures legally and safely out of the ground, well, it can get a bit blurry. So today, we're unpacking the reality of building a Seattle ADU in 2026. The source material reveals exactly what we're in for, so let's map the whole thing out together. Okay, let's dive into this because we really need to expose a very common myth right out of the gate. If you've looked into this at all, you've probably seen the standard marketing pitch promising a lightning-fast 6-month build from start to finish. Sounds great, right? But looking at the hard data, the 2026 reality for a new stick-built detached ADU or daddy is actually anywhere from 8 to 12 months. There's just no other honest number. Sure, if you're doing a simple garage conversion or bringing in a prefab unit, you might shave a couple of months off that. But for a standard custom build, you need to plan on a full year, from your very first coffee with an architect to the day you finally turn the keys in the lock. So why on earth does it take a full year? Well, it turns out the delay rarely has anything to do with the actual hammering of nails. The physical construction is actually remarkably predictable. What really surprised me in the research is that the true wild card, the one factor that genuinely makes the difference between a smooth, easy project and a massive headache, is navigating the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections, or the SDCI. Yeah, the paperwork, not the lumber, is the single biggest delay risk for your entire timeline. Let's look at exactly how this plays out. All right, Phase 1, Design and Permits. To really understand this, we need to break the project down into chunks. This is your first major administrative hurdle, where your project is officially born on paper. Looking at the chronological order of operations across the 4 phases here, Phase 1 takes up roughly a third of your entire standard 32-week timeline. We are talking about 12 weeks of purely administrative work before a single shovel ever hits the dirt. Your architect is drawing up elevations, structural engineers are grinding through calculations, and then it all goes into the queue at the SDCI. I know, it feels incredibly slow when you just want to get started, but getting this right on paper is absolutely crucial to preventing incredibly expensive changes later on. However, keep in mind that that 12-week timeline assumes relatively smooth sailing. Depending on your specific piece of land, you could face some severe administrative holdups. For instance, do you have a steep slope on your property in Queen Anne? Or maybe poor soils somewhere south of I-90? Well, that might trigger what's called an environmentally critical area, or ECA review. And get this, a project touching a steep slope can add 3 entire months of administrative back and forth before ground is ever broken. So your absolute most critical job as a homeowner during this phase, make your design decisions quickly and lock your scope tight. Moving right along to phases 2 through 4. Let's move on to the physical construction and see how this builds up from the ground. Once you finally have that golden permit in hand, the real action begins. First, the excavation crews clear the site. Utility trenches are dug out for Seattle Public Utilities and City Light, and that concrete foundation is poured. Next up is framing, which is always exciting because it turns a flat concrete slab into a recognizable house. Once it's weather-tight, the rough-in trades arrive. And guys, this is a highly choreographed sequence. Plumbers, HVAC techs, and electricians all have to finish their specific work, and then, this is key, an SDCI inspector must come out, multiple times, to sign off on their inspection cards before anyone is legally allowed to close up those walls with drywall. Once the pretty finishes are done, you have to pass one last final inspection to earn your certificate of occupancy. But come on, we can't talk about digging into Seattle dirt without mentioning the classic Seattle surprise. During that initial site prep and excavation phase, your carefully planned timeline can be completely derailed. Discovering an old, buried, totally undocumented heating oil tank from the 1940s, or suddenly hitting unstable soil that somehow dodged the geotech survey, yeah, that will stop a job cold. Honestly, it's practically a rite of passage for local homeowners at this point. And then, of course, there are the utilities. A very common issue in older Seattle neighborhoods is discovering that your home's side sewer is cracked, or it's just plain undersized to handle a brand new ADU connection. If you are forced to replace that side sewer, it is a massive undertaking. Just that single underground discovery can instantly add 20 grand to your budget and slap a full month of delay onto your schedule. Which leads us to Section 3, Real Costs and Contingencies. Let's talk about the financial reality, because this is where the rubber meets the road. An absolutely crucial lesson here is that your overall costs aren't just driven by lumber prices or the fancy tile you picked out for the bathroom. They are heavily driven by what it literally takes to get the structure out of the ground legally and safely in this specific city. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these three representative 2026 projects prove that site-specific issues heavily dictate the total price and schedule. Check out the Ballard project, a brand new 800 square foot detached unit built from the ground up. That comes in at $465,000 and takes 38 weeks. But compare that to the Fremont garage conversion. Because they're utilizing an existing structure, even with a new side sewer required, the cost drops significantly to $240,000 and 29 weeks. And right in the middle, you've got the Capitol Hill basement conversion at $310,000, specifically because it required heavy, complex structural excavation. Simply put, your site dictates your cost. And because of those wild cards we just talked about, the bad soil, the side sewers, the steep slopes, you absolutely must be prepared financially. Listen closely to this. While the National Association of Home Builders recommends a 10 to 15% contingency on renovations for older homes, in Seattle, holding back that 10 to 15% of your total budget is not advice. It is a requirement for survival, period. You will almost certainly need those funds for unavoidable change orders or utility surprises.
Section 4. Compressing your project's timeline. Now, take a deep breath. It is not all doom and gloom, and I really don't want you to feel discouraged by the risks. If you want to take control and save up to 6 weeks on your build, the data points to 3 very specific, highly actionable strategies. First, use one of Seattle's pre-approved DA-Do plans. These designs have already undergone initial city review, which massively streamlines the SDCI's timeline. Second, lock in every single finish selection. I mean everything, from the flooring down to the bathroom faucets, before the project even starts. If you don't change your mind midstream, you don't suffer delays waiting for backordered tile. And finally, consider hiring an integrated design build firm. When the architect and the builder are on the exact same team under one roof, communication is incredibly tight, and problems are solved instantly without any finger pointing. Doing these 3 things eliminates the biggest sources of homeowner-caused delays.
Finally, Section 5. Vetting your Seattle contractor. So, this brings us to the most crucial phase of the explainer, how to actually protect your investment by strictly vetting who you hire. It turns out the very best builders in Seattle aren't just expert carpenters. They have to be expert navigators of Seattle bureaucracy. The sources make one point incredibly clear. A contractor schedule shouldn't just be some vague, hand-wavy outline. You need to demand to see these exact milestone dates in their schedule before you ever sign a contract. You need to see the scope lock date, the target permit submittal dates, when they plan to pour the foundation, and specifically when they plan to call the SDCI for that final inspection. Having these exact dates in writing holds everybody accountable right from day one. And here is a massive takeaway to protect yourself legally. Verify their Washington State Labor and Industries standing. Any contractor you hire absolutely must have an active L&I registration number. By law, that number has to be displayed on all their bids and advertisements. They also must carry a continuous surety bond. That's $30,000 for general contractor or $15,000 for specialty contractor. And they need to have at least $250,000 in general liability insurance. Do not skip checking this. It is your necessary, non-negotiable legal shield against fraud and total disaster. Building an ADU in Seattle is hands down one of the most rewarding ways to upgrade your property and your financial future. But as we've seen throughout this research, it requires serious stamina, a really solid contingency fund, and a fantastic team to navigate the city's complex landscape. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Knowing the realities of the SDCI paperwork, the potential for digging up buried oil tanks, and the strict timelines required, is your property and your patients truly ready for a 12-month commitment? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, good luck with your build.